Welcome to X-Men 97, episode 4 of Cyclops is Waiting for Me, an X-Men animated recap podcast. I'm Rod. If you didn't catch it, yesterday's episode, or hopefully yesterday's episode, was an interview with Isaac Robinson Smith, the voice of Bishop in X-Men 97. It was awesome. We just let him talk, and he also kind of offered like a little bit of, I don't want to say help, but like, he was open to talking to other aspiring voice actors in the SoCal area and stuff because he believes in paying it forward. So super cool episode. Definitely recommend listening to it.
And I'm JC, and I am proud to introduce Forbes' 30 Under 30, aka the second best baby blues in San Francisco, aka the pure one, at Tim Geddes. And yeah, I almost got that perfect, Tim. So
I love it. Let Tim host. Man, we go way back, almost as far back as the X-Men show. That's not quite true, but I can't believe that we are finally here talking about this show and that it is as good as it is. I am week to week just literally mind blown. Like, just to go off for a second, sorry to hijack this, but I loved the show when it first came out. Obviously, I was a little kid. I don't think I ever watched it all the way through like I know y'all did with this whole rewatch, but I've seen so many of the episodes so many times. I've read so many X-Men comics. I'm very familiar with X-Men. But when they announced X-Men 97, I was like, that's really exciting, but there's no way it's going to be great. Like, at best, it's going to be nostalgic, and like, I can't wait to hear the theme song again. And then Invincible comes out, and I'm watching this, and I'm like, this is just literal perfect TV for superheroes, for comic books. Like, wow, like, it's going to be embarrassing for X-Men to come out week to week alongside Invincible. And here we are, week to week, both of them coming out, and both of them just being impeccable. And I think that is a testament to the quality of X-Men 97, that I could say that, because Invincible is firing on all cylinders, and so is this. What a special moment we're having right now.
It's a great time for comic book animation going on right now, no doubt. Cyclops is Waiting for Me is our weekly podcast series where 2, sometimes 3 friends gather around these mics and are going back and watching every single X-Men animated episode that we can find. I promise this is the last kind of funny reference that I put in the script. This podcast started with the original 1992 X-Men the Animated Series, building up to this moment, the release of X-Men 97.
Some quick reminders. We're a recap show about an episode that aired less than a week ago. There will be spoilers. If you don't want to spoil it for you, pause the podcast, watch the episode, and come back. We are currently not sponsored by or affiliated with Marvel Animation, Disney, or Disney Plus in any way. However, they've been great, like we mentioned with Isaac, maybe some people in the future, cool voice talent from the show, but they didn't get any like final say in anything, or it didn't definitely give us any money, so.
They did not give us
yet, but if you want, if you guys are still listening, don't forget to follow us on social media at Cyclops IWFM Pod on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, X, and Facebook, and of course, make sure to follow us on all your favorite podcast services.
And now on to the show. Today, we're going to be talking about Season 1, Episode 4, titled Motendo, as well as Life Death Part 1. It aired on April 3rd, 2024, and currently sits at a 7.4 star rating on IMDb. I didn't know what to expect going into this, of having dual titled episodes as a part of this broadcast. It was a little bit unexpected, but I think they did a great job of balancing the two out.
I can't remember if we said it on the show or I was just talking to you like offline, but I can't believe that like one of my like things, like predictions, was like actually correct. I was like, hey, I wonder if this is going to be 2 short episodes. I didn't actually think that was going to be right.
It is interesting, though, right? When you look at the titles that have come out of the rest of the season, and so it seems like next episode is going to be something else, and then after that, we're getting a little bit of the Life Death Part 2, and I find that fascinating to your point about it being kind of 2 episodes. Storm's place in the story, which is so fascinating and so good. I love that while she is separate from the mansion and from everybody else, they're still able to kind of like have these like dual storylines progressing, and it feels like it's not so much like, oh, here's the real plot and then here's this like side story. It feels like there's 2 main plots happening at the same time, and I'm just very impressed with their ability so far to have substantial story character beats, but then also have almost monster of the week type bad guys like we expect from the old show, but in a way that it feels a lot more like it's all part of something greater.
I was actually telling JC last night at Scum and Villainy, which for those of you who don't know is a bar in Hollywood, and we actually got to watch last night's episode with Rogue, Gambit, and Sunspot, or the voices of.
So cool.
Yeah, they were there with us at the bar.
And I mentioned it to JC, like, I totally forgot what I was going to say about that. Oh, I mentioned to JC, welcome to dealing with me. I was telling JC, I would totally watch a whole season or series even of Storm and Forge in the desert, because it's just so fascinating where Forge doesn't have very visible or spectacular powers and Storm is depowered, and I'm still so fascinated in their relationship. Like, we're dealing with the story. Like, Storm without powers, in my opinion, is like so much stronger than like any Halle Berry with powers. Stuff. So like, it's not just ragging on that, it's just like, wow, they really thought this character out.
I mean, honestly, the way that this was shown to us was so romantic. I feel like they like did such a good job of making this like a real moment for these characters that I know this sounds silly to say, but it's like this felt like so much more than just a cartoon, because they were able to, you know, we've talked so much about the social political elements of X-Men forever, but you watch this show the last couple episodes and it's just like, oh man, it's as good as it's ever been at handling that stuff. But there's also something so endearing about these characters and their relationships, and to have Storm, someone the episode 1 of this showed us how strong she is, if anybody didn't remember, to depower her and have that be such a moment, a crisis of conscience of who she is, and her leaving by choice to find herself, and then finding Forge, and Forge revealing that he was actually the one that kind of created the thing that took everything from her. There's shots in the conversation that they had and like what them riding the horse and all of that felt so emotional and so like they were having this like beautiful moment between each other. And like, that's powerful, like storytelling in a show like this. And I'm just so impressed that they were able to pull it off.
Have you heard the new Beyonce album at all?
Not yet.
There's a duet with Miley Cyrus and Beyonce, and that horse riding scene is the energies match perfectly. I put it on our stories the other night, like last night.
Did we get muted yet? We always get muted when you mess with music at this point. So
what's funny is it does claim it, but I use the sound in the app, like the licensed sound that's in the thing. But yeah, to your point, like, yeah, it's super romantic, and I already accept this like in the original series, but this is the reason that like, when it came to that whole scene where you mentioned where they confront each other, I was like, this is a soap opera with superpowers, and I'm cool with it. Like, I'm just going, like, we can't pretend it's not.
Yeah. No, but that's, I think, actually the thing that I'm gushing about the show so much, because I'm just so impressed at the balancing act that they've been able to pull off of making this nostalgic and hit everything that it needs to, of the remember this, remember that. It's also like, hey, we're not gonna like around anything. We're diving as deep as possible into expanding the story and going like nuts with the lore and the appearances. And like, if you don't know who these characters are, we don't actually care. Like, we're just gonna keep telling you the story, but then also having it be so well written and so believable in the dialogue and what they're saying, but it's so dramatic and so over the top, and like, it works. And I feel like we've seen so many things try to do any one of those elements and fail miserably. Somehow this show is managing to do all of them in this way that enhances every element to become so much more. And I think that the way Storm talks is a perfect example. The way Magneto talks is a perfect example. It should not work in 2024, but it really does.
I mean, I think a big part of it, and we mentioned this on the last episode, one of the writers, Charlie Feldman, is a personal friend. And I can tell you, Charlie is such a legit nerd, loves this kind of stuff. Like, this wasn't just I'm taking a writing gig for the sake of a writing gig. This was them getting the opportunity to write for a story that they cared about. And I feel like Bo and the other members of the team that were a part of it, that rings true across the board. Like, they all cared about this narrative. So
it seems like they care about every single thing. And that it just shines through so much, where it's like, I mean, that first episode, like every fight scene we get, every character action moment, it's like, this is the thing of dreams. And like, I am such a sucker for music. I really care about getting like character themes right and show themes right, and oh my lord, did they nail this. And I love how much they keep delivering, where every week there's different change ups. We now see Jean Grey with the ponytail, like Storm's not in the intro anymore, like we get Forge gets a moment. Like, I love that they're kind of using this theme that we would never skip because we're not crazy, but they're giving us reasons to not skip. And even the Marvel Studios logo for this episode 4, being a like X-Men 90s instrument version of the Marvel Studios fanfare, I'm just like, oh, y'all are just being too good to me right now.
I kind of heard it as like also like that Konami coded, you know.
Yeah, like, for sure.
Tim, if you're not familiar, like I work in music, and so a lot of it ends up being like library music or stuff for corporate things. And I don't want to speak for every corporation, but a grand majority of them can't say like, we want it to sound like X because they can't have a paper trail of like legality and stuff. But so I'm always like wondering, what are the notes for something like this where like they can't use the word, or they probably won't use the words Konami and stuff. They're like, we want, if you had an arcade machine that happened to be between the years of 92, I'm like,
yeah, well, I do think this is probably one of the rare instances where they could probably get away with a bit more of like, we want to do this because not so much the Konami side of it, but the Capcom side of it, of all the fighting games that are so clearly influenced in everything that we see here. But
like the one that's literally behind me in the shop. Yeah,
100%. And I mean, I love that I'm on this episode, by the way, because like I'm mainly known for video games, and like I just love that this was such a love letter. Like, God.
So take a peek behind the curtain for people listening. I had just asked Tim, when are you available? And Tim told me the first Thursday from the series. That worked out. And then I looked at the episode titles after the fact, and I was like, this is the perfect episode to bring Tim on to.
It was so perfect. And I was just like, my mouth was just open, jaw dropped the entire time. Like, there's so much love and care put into so many different elements of this. But like the music, doing the X-Men theme song in that video game style, but like just the way they showed it, and like we're seeing and Sunspot like fighting these Sentinels, having the different colors for like how hard they are to beat, and like it being in that like 4:3 ratio with the sides of the screen being that classic Capcom fighting game thing of like their character with their face behind it. I'm like, oh my God, this is so good.
So let's get into some of the specifics. You already mentioned the music was different at the beginning, Tim. We see Jubilee with her flashback from the Long Shot episode, which was before, or it was one of the better episodes that was done with the poor animation, but sometimes that era of animation doesn't get the most love, from the original 92 fan base. We also see Forge with X Factor from the Cold Comfort episode shown. And then the only one that didn't really feel like it fit into it was we actually had the reminder shot of when Xavier was going into the Hellfire Club. They've been pretty good about everything having a meaning and attachment to the specific episode. That one felt like they're like, oh, well, we have to remove Storm, so we need to insert something else into this spot for me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Or do you think maybe, I was wondering if, because I'm not familiar with the villain in the second part of this episode, if that ties back into something Hellfire or Emma Frost or something.
All the research I did, it does not. But totally a fair question.
We'll see. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. And Tim, just so you're aware, Rod was not a hardcore comic reader. His basis comes from the toys, the cartoons, and the video games. I'm a nerd like you and have too many comics to speak of. So,
I think it's a wonderful thing, though, right? Like, as we're at a point now that like being a fan can mean so many different things, and like there's get all that gatekeeping out of here. You know what I mean? It's just like, no matter how many comics I read, how much do I retain? How much do I actually know? I don't know. I just know I'm having a blast with this. And I actually want to say, like, I am such a huge fan of Marvel Snap, not only just because it's a great game and so much fun to play and stuff, but I love how much it has educated people, myself included, on characters that I might not have been familiar with, no matter how many comics I've read, no matter how many shows I've watched, games I've played, action figures I've touched, whatever, But like my fiance Gia has essentially watched the MCU movies, and well, I guess at this point all the Marvel movies, but like that's her only gateway into all this stuff. She's never read a comic, she's never played the games, never anything. She's now addicted to Marvel Snap. So when we're watching X-Men 97, she's like, oh shit, it's this person, it's this person. Yeah. It's like when we see Mojo, she's like, I know Mojo, and she kind of gets an idea of what his whole deal is, and she knows Forge and she knows Jubilee. Like, it's just very, very cool, and I just love where we're at with all this, because I just think that it's more accessible than it's ever been, and we're getting things like this high quality that like make it all feel more worth it.
It's so funny because like that part, half of the reason that I didn't ever really get too much in the comics was like I have like a very short term memory for storylines and stuff. But the other half was like in the town I grew up in, we literally had one comic shop, and it was a literal barn. And so I went to go buy comics because of the animated series. And I was like, oh, superheroes, that's really cool. So I remember buying like a random copy of Spider-Man 2099, not in order or whatever, just because I like the cover and stuff. So yeah, and then me and my brother got super into the action figures. We knew every character just from the figures. I was like,
so cool.
Here's Tusk. JC was like, Tusk. I was like, yeah, I remember.
Of all the obscure characters he could have picked up on in 92, that was not the one I was expecting.
That's great.
He's going to have a cool toy. Like,
Starts off with the Motendo episode. And we see a great interaction between Gambit, Magneto, and Rogue. And I don't know if you've been following the stuff on social, Tim, but at WonderCon, they played up this relationship so perfectly in person that like now seeing what's happening in real time on the show airing, it's been amazing to watch.
I love it, man. And it's, again, the soap opera stuff. Like, that's what I'm here for, dude. It's like there are a few things I love more in life than comic book superhero stuff, video games, shitty reality TV, and professional wrestling. And there's a common denominator between all of those things, and I think that it's that soap opera, weird-ass dialogue, the will they, won't they, you want to ship things, like all of it. And, the dynamic between Magneto, Rogue, and Gambit, I am so here for it.
It's wild because I remember people right at the beginning were very angry about it, but it's making such compelling TV that, like, yeah, you get that you want these two to end up together. And let's be real, maybe end of season 1, going into season 2, they're gonna get back together. Like, that's one of the ultimate love stories of the X-Men. But seeing them in, like, this not necessarily a breakup, but not fully together scenario too, it's really damn interesting. It's like, if you give everybody, like, happiness, is there a payoff to it? Like, you got to get there and you got to earn it.
You need the story.
Yeah. I mean, I was flipping tables at the end of episode 2 because Storm's been my all-time favorite, and they messed her up so bad in the movies. I was like, we finally got the Omega level. They said it. I don't know if you heard the clip from it that we put on Reels, but I literally said, I was like, that was a sexual moment when they were like, give him the forecast, Omega level.
Well, like, I think I've watched that 100 times. Like, no lie. Like, that was, I have chills right now. That was incredible.
Her turning the desert into glass and shit. Anyway, like, but then I was like, I don't, like, and then they took it away, but it's giving us this, like, beautiful story. Like you said, like, the conflict is giving us, I mentioned to JC in a previous episode, like, I get why it had to be her because she was the only one not, like, in a love triangle that people cared about. Like, the only other person, maybe Beast, but I don't know if people would have, like, would have had the weight, you know, if he got, it might have, actually, he might have enjoyed it because he wanted to get rid of the blue or something, but, like, now, it's funny because I didn't even think about them giving her, like, a romance. So now we're getting, like, it's so cool.
Well,
like, we'll
I mean, this is a comic story, right? Like, I remember reading this, the Life Death stuff a long time ago. I don't remember it, but I remember when it popped on last night, I was like, oh, yeah, this is a thing.
So I never read Life Death, but the interesting part of it is part 1 in the comics was Uncanny 186, and then they did not get back to it until Uncanny 198. So they literally made people wait a year to give that story. We're only waiting 2 weeks.
I wonder if that's, like, kind of a sly meta reference, though. That's a little fun.
It has to be.
So everybody's around the table. We finally get confirmation that the show has aired in close to real time, and Jubilee is turning 18. That's something we've actually been wondering, like, did it actually go from 92 and this was over the course of multiple years, or was this like a 6 to 8 month thing? Like, we actually get confirmation she is turning 18.
What does that mean? Like, what does that change?
During the original 92 series, when we were watching it, we were kind of like ballparking her age from month to month and stuff. And then when this show started, we were like, is this 6 months later or like a year and a half later? Or like,
so what's it actually? Because does the show, the 92 show, was that 92?
Yeah, and she was 13 at that time. So it literally is the 5 years in the aging and stuff like that. So
very cool, very cool.
Because we were like, oh, in the long shot episode, she's like, she's got her learner's permit, but how many years has this been going on? So this actually gave us a formal confirmation of that.
Rad.
Yep. She comes down. She's all excited. She does the who's got 2 thumbs and is ready to party. It's me. And they're like, oh, well, what would you like to do? And she's like, I want to go to the arcade like old times. And all I could hear in my head is Rod, because Rod, like, loved the whole, like, mall rat, like, all that stuff about the original Jubilee characterization.
I also love that old times for her was 3 years ago.
Yeah. Hey, but when you're that young, that's true, right?
No, I totally get it.
That was episode 1, right? Where where she's in the arcade. Ah, so cool.
And Magneto gives, like, a concerned face, and then we jump to her mocking Magneto in her bedroom with Sunspot, so, you know, at least she's got a date for her birthday. And they drop a really important piece of lore that the Genoshan people are formally getting put into the UN. I know we had alluded to it in a previous episode, but now it's like, oh, this is actually a very big day. It really sucks that it's happening on her 18th birthday, though.
I love that Sunspot is, like, he's actually aware of like current events.
Right.
And Jubilee is like vaguely aware of them, but they don't have any weight. And he's like, yeah, like a nation of your people joining the UN is kind of a big deal.
Big deal. Yeah.
We get some Easter eggs in her bedroom. Most noticeable is there is a long shot plushie that is on the shelf. There is a poster that looks like the classic yellow Bruce Lee suit from some of his movies. And then there's a band poster that instead of it saying NIN for Nine Inch Nails, it's INI, but it's the same style font and stuff like that.
Inch Nails, Inch, that classic band.
Yeah, exactly. So Sunspot sees the video game console. We get the impression he's actually not into gaming. And then they show us the Nintendo. And Tim,
it's a Sega Genesis, baby. It's a straight up Sega Genesis. And I was like, I love this so much. The art on the cartridge was one of the old games. I forget which one it was because there was a ton of them. But
so it was a mashup of two pieces of artwork, actually. So the original Genesis game, just titled X-Men, is the main art. But if you go and look at the shot, there's also Super Nintendo's X-Men Mutant Apocalypse. That's why there was an Apocalypse face in there, because that was not on the Genesis one. And we plastered that all over our Instagram as soon as I saw those.
So I don't want to subtweet anybody, but I will. Another very like large comic book or like nerd property or whatever called that reference and completely referenced the wrong video game. They referenced the Mojo video game. Probably because it was an easy answer, but I was like, that's not the game.
Yeah.
It doesn't look. I mean, it only.
I didn't even know there was a Mojo game. That's crazy.
It was a Game Gear one, so nobody knows there was one.
Jesus, the Game
The only
Gear.
thing that's similar with is they followed like the video game artwork format of like the stacking, but otherwise, yeah, it was like the wrong characters and everything.
So Jubilee is like, I don't actually know what that is. Leads to them having tendrils pop out of the Motendo.
Dude, this was a lot more graphic than I expected, and that's something that's been in line with the show. It is so much more mature than I would have ever thought. Like just visually, like there's some scary stuff. Last episode had some real scary stuff with his mom.
The horror out of the TV.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And the like cybernetic tendrils coming into them and going into their eyes. I was like, whoa, this is
eyes.
It's a lot.
Almost made me throw up. I don't like things in my eyes and stuff. And that when it was like I was fine because it was basically doing kind of Tron, right? Like getting sucked in, and then I saw the tendrils like enter the eyes. I was like, ah.
Yeah, it did have a little bit of the feel from Clockwork Orange too, which also resembles Mojo's face of like the eyes are stuck open and stuff like that. So then there's a sound effect, which, I mean, I don't know if PTSD is the right word for it, but that was dialing up to AOL back as a, teenager or so.
That's called earning your time on the internet.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
When you could get booted off just because your parents pick up because they have to call somebody and they don't scream across the house to make sure you're on or not.
But that's why you logged in at 2 a.m. and for no other reason.
So they wake up. There's obviously like glitchy animations and stuff like that. They think they were asleep, and a sentinel hand smashes through the wall, grabs Sunspot, and then pulls them out into a cityscape.
And we see the bad guys running. Like, I forget their name. The
Friends of Humanity.
XFL or whatever the hell. What's again?
Friends of Humanity.
The Friends of Humanity. Yeah.
Yes.
And,
with their Mega Busters.
And that's the thing. They all have Mega Man's freaking hand cannon. And I'm like, this is such a great, just fun video game thing. Like, why? It's cool. That's why.
Did you notice the Sentinels kept changing sizes too, like the original show? Like, at one,
their scale would shift. Yeah.
The first scene, it was big enough to grab Jubilee with one giant hand, and then the next shot, they'd be like maybe twice as tall as her.
That's funny.
One Easter egg I did pick up on that I didn't see from anybody else online. When that's happening and she saves Roberto, he lands on a car. It is like 98% the car from Street Fighter 2, like the car that you would beat up in the mini game. It is just literally pointed to the wrong direction. That's the only difference to it, but it is absolutely that vibe.
That's such a great callback.
So they're running through the streets. They hide in an alley. There's a phone that rings, and that had to be a reference to The Matrix, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Like going and picking up. There was no way. It came out 2 years after this would have taken place, but that was absolutely a Matrix.
What's that called in movies when they're going for like a time period vibe and not like exactness? You know, like when they do a movie about the 60s and it's like takes place in 67, but the song didn't come out till 69, but they play it anyway. And it's more of like for the there's a filmmakers know the term that I'm talking about, but like it's something that I remember, 'cause, I deal with music and stuff. I call that out a lot, and people are like, right, it's the whatever the the term is. I was like, okay, again, it's just the vibe.
Yeah, asking us about technical terms on certain things is like asking the classic Rooster Teeth podcast to explain anything scientific. It's just a bad idea, and it's going to be terribly inaccurate.
Yeah.
So there's a quick loading screen. They end up, and we see the classic Genosha Dam from the Slave Island episode, and we see a few references to classic characters, and we're going to play our favorite game. Rod, who are those cameos?
I remember Blob, not Sunfire, and Domino. Did they show other ones? I remember those three.
Domino was the last one. So there was actually one in the foreground right at the beginning too.
I don't know if I...
It was Thunderbird. You don't see his face, but you definitely saw the costume from like that giant size X-Men #1. But it was weird that they didn't show his face. But yeah, they did insert those Easter eggs. And all those characters were in the Slave Island episode originally too. So they actually start getting attacked from off screen. There's some of the Genoshan guards that are chasing them. Those guards get shot from behind, and we see this character reveal for the first time. Rod, I'm not even going to ask you if you knew. Tim, had you ever seen this character before?
No, I don't. The one with all the arms? Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, no. The character who saves them.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had not either. Apparently, this character is a reference to one of the comics. You know, we already gave all the spoiler warnings. So this future version of Jubilee was an alternate timeline one who was actually a part of like capturing Jubilee in the comics, not the savior she ends up being in this episode.
I loved her in this episode. I thought she was fantastic. And it was the voice actress, right, of the original
one.
Jubilee.
Yep, it was Allison Court.
Such an amazing pull there. Their dynamic was great. Her with the shades, like she was just oozing cool, man. Big fan.
Also, I noticed this on my third rewatch. Before we find out who she is, because her name is
Absessa.
So yeah, before we find out who she is, when the Friends of Humanity gets shot down, Jubilee's like, "It wasn't me," and I was like, "Oh, foreshadowing."
Right. Yeah, there are a few things that watching the episode in hindsight, like it just clicks. Like the first time I watch it and she gives the speech later on in the episode, it was cool. But then I found out after the fact that it was Allison Court who said it. And the whole speech takes on a different meaning about moving on, growing up, and like all those things. Considering we all know Allison stepped down from the role. It wasn't that she, was recast by the studios. It was her giving that role to somebody for the proper representation of the character. So all that made it hit deeper for me when I had that full context.
Yeah.
So the character Absessa disappears. Mojo appears on a screen. You realize that he's way, way skinnier. And you find out it's because he literally feeds off of ratings.
Oh, is that what that was? I thought he was just sucking it in. It was like a reference to that. That makes sense, though. Your thing makes more sense.
This whole stuff kind of like lost me because like I feel like later he kind of busts out and it was like he was like hiding it. Like, this is weird. I didn't like it.
So I read that as like, as stuff was getting exciting, once, they're formally in the game and stuff is happening, that's when the crowd starts going nuts. And the crowd going nuts is what basically feeds him that energy again to make him blow up. So
Got it.
Yeah.
He's gross either way.
Oh, he's horribly gross.
Yeah.
Everything hanging and stuff like that. It's not a great visual, but it is a great visual. So
this voice acting though is less aggravating than the original.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I don't even remember the old one.
The other one was very.
It was a negative.
We'll call it out what it was. It was a very negative Jewish stereotype from like certain phrasing and stuff like that, which was pretty commonly accepted in Hollywood in the 90s. Now, people are way more thoughtful about certain things. Like,
It was also a lot screechier too, so it was like a combination of things. They just overall polished it.
I did really like his character though. I feel like the whole we're pivoting to video games, like that's where the money is. That's where it all. It's like it feels very smart and of the times. Like again, I keep complimenting the show for that, but like this is good writing for a character like Mojo that is could potentially be one note or could really be a great use of a character to kind of like look at people's media consumption and the potential pitfalls of it all.
Well, and he does a great job of gassing up Jubilee that like, even though she knows she's kind of a captor as this is all being explained, she's also kind of enjoying it too. He's like, yeah, you're the star, all the other X-Men are, they're too old. They don't connect with the youth. They're not the point of view. And that was the most meta comment possible because it was like, oh yeah, in 92, that literally was her role that she was created for when she replaced Kitty Pryde. So
I like how Mojo's examples also split up like the age differences between the crew.
Yeah.
Yep.
With all the different shows. Who's the boss?
Who's the Boss was great because literally the 5 people shown at one point were all bosses of an X-Men team, whether it was in the comics or in the show.
Yeah, because we had Storm, Magneto,
Cyclops, Xavier
Cyclops,
and Jean.
Jean. Awesome. Yep. So cool.
And then they go to a different world, which was like the reinvention, but it literally was all the diversity of the characters. If you've seen, there's a screenshot of the original A Different World cast. There's one extra mutant in it, but other than that, it's all of them in there. It's wild.
And
very cool.
The third one, do you think that was foreshadowing for Jean and Scott? Because they said
the divorce court? Well, okay, Tim, your opinion is pure on this because Rob and I have talked this to death. Do you think they actually got married, or do you think a swap had happened before the marriage?
Oh man, see, that's really interesting. I don't know. I feel like this is one of those things, having not watched the show to prepare for this. I don't know exactly where we're at, so I'm kind of just going off of what they're giving me here. I love how confusing it all is. I love how early in the season we're dealing with that's not Jean, this is Jean. How are they gonna like deal with all this stuff? I feel like Cyclops did not know.
Oh, I fully agree. He had no idea. I don't think he knew literally until Beast dropped the bomb and with the worst bedside manner ever.
Ever. Yeah. So wait, what exactly are you asking then?
We're asking, when do you think the swap happened that Madeline took Jean's place?
I would imagine in between the time of the last season ending and this starting, right? Like, I don't think that it would have been during the old show. Am I wrong? Like, let me know.
Well, they mentioned...
one, we don't know, so I can't even tell you if you're wrong, but like, I've seen very valid sounding arguments for like 4 different spots in time, as well as off-screen stuff that could have happened that we had no idea about either.
Interesting. Madeline said this when she left in this current series or both of them, Madeline and Jean both said that they don't know who got married to Scott.
Yeah.
So that kind of throws it back to the real show. My theory that I mentioned in previous episodes was it'd be kind of poetic, tragically poetic, to have it so that Jean and Scott never get married. It's like this cursed relationship, like something always, because they got married technically twice, but not really. Well, the first time they didn't really get married, or the first time they tried to get married, it like got interrupted. And then the second time they got married, it was Morph. And in 90s logic, there's no marriage license or something. It's just
if a priest doesn't say you are now man and wife, you're not officially married.
I get it.
Then they actually had a wedding, and we were led to believe that was the real one. But now in this show, they're like, "Is it?" And I was like, "Wow, that would be really wicked, but kind of cool if that was just their curse, so they never actually."
And then 2 last quick cameos in the different world shot. North Star is there, who we know is a member of Alpha Flight. And Darwin, who was done dirty in the movies, somehow worse than they did Storm dirty in the movies, because that's the guy who cannot die, and they killed him rapid fire. So
baffling decision.
Yep. So we get this graphic reveal of Magneto. It's absolutely a Konami vibe, but when you actually look at the gameplay graphics, Tim, to me, it looked like Shredder's Revenge or Scott Pilgrim. Like, those were the 2 games. It was that newer 16-bit art style for me.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we even see this in, like, the opening shot of Jubilee kind of running, when she does her, like, little sparks, like, super move or whatever it is. Yeah, it's very much the more, like, modern take on, like, Scott Pilgrim's the perfect pull for that. And, I don't know what the filmmaker term for it is, but they were going for the vibe of 90s video games as opposed to, like, actually, like, I think that they were going for how we remember it looking as opposed to how it would officially look on there was inspirations from little Sega Saturn stuff from like the Genesis era, from Super Nintendo. I think there was a little bit of everything there.
We see a character select screen along with Jubilee and Sunspot. You get Colossus, you get Magic, you get Longshot, and you get Cable, and then a really weird empty black spot. And I was like, was there something there that they
secret
pulled
characters?
Over? Yeah,
unlockables.
You get the dystopian street as stage 1. And the Days of Future Past, which was Uncanny X-Men number 141, the poster of all of those characters. So this means Kitty Pryde is finally officially canon in this X-Men timeline, because she's one of the sprites on the poster. Ironically, when her character was named Sprite is when she appears on that poster.
That's so funny. Hey, that's kind of awesome. I already said this earlier, but like this moment was one of my favorites so far. I put this, the storm, give me the forecast moment is number one, but this video game opening scene was so good where you hear the music start to go off and I'm like, oh, they're about to do this. And it's just the X-Men theme hitting. It was so good, man. I was like giddy.
I was telling JC last night, they're not going to do it, but I really want Disney to make like a web-based version of this game.
Here's the thing. They're not going to do it like that.
Yeah.
A Shredder's Revenge, though, it has to be. It has to be brewing. It has to.
Like, it has to be, but like what we know from the gaming industry from those leaks, and obviously, Tim, I know you're connected on stuff, so never break an NDA for us or anything like that. But we've seen Insomniac has the X-Men license.
Yeah, but I don't think that they have the I don't think it works that way anymore.
You don't think it's an exclusive from
No, because I mean, like, think about it. Like, Marvel Ultimate Alliance has Spider-Man in it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And that's totally separate. Like, maybe they can't call the game X-Men, but like you can find ways around that with whatever the beat 'em up is. But I think that they'd be crazy to not be talking to, I forget the team that worked on Shredder's Revenge, but God, what a game that was. That game had as much love for 90s Turtles video games as this show has for the X-Men. So it's like, put them together.
I would buy it. Yeah.
So they beat the first level pretty handedly. Jubilee completely outscores Sunspot, who still is not using his powers. You go to the second level, which is the Savage Land, and you get like those random characters that they made him a little bit more like Sauron, but I still to this day do not know why those dinosaurs were in the original Konami Savage Land episode. Sauron pops down, ends up grabbing Jubilee, starts eating away her power, and then from nowhere, all of a sudden, Jubilee gets her power back. And we find out that Abscessa is messing around, has been an ongoing bug that Mojo's dealing with. And he starts yelling at Spiral. And she's like, well, this is what happens because you killed tech support. And to your point about even like the graphic violence of this and stuff like that, it's like they never would have said that in 92. So you know this is being written for our age group rather than like a kid can still watch it, because I think we've also gotten easier with language as you've all gotten older. But at the same time, 92 Saturday morning cartoon standards and practices never would have been an option.
Totally.
Because they even had like, was it Dark Phoenix, where they were like, yeah, she destroyed a vacant universe. Like,
it was a unpopulated world that she blew up in that. When it's like, oh yeah, in the comics, it was literally billions of people were killed for her.
Yeah.
No. So they end up beating the level. They go to Asteroid M, and Sunspot starts giving this, little bit of a speech to her of, you gotta start growing up. You have to be able to move on. And Jubilee's like, I don't really want to deal with this. She starts getting scolded, and then Sunspot just gets smashed from off camera by the boss battle with Magneto.
And it is awesome. I love everything about this. The way that it's shot, the way that the camera's just moving around, and Jubilee is literally doing a video game boss fight. She's seeing his pattern, she waits for it, and then she acts, and it is just so rewarding. And like, again, this is the type of thing that you can't just get right. You need to really know what you're doing and really care to get the little details to add up. And they knocked it out of the park.
I love that they actually got the recorded I Am Magneto. And it's probably an original re-recording of it, but just I remember playing the arcade machine.
Yep.
And they had like 4 voice lines in the entire game, and that was one of them. And it always just...
It sticks out. Oh, yeah.
And they always sounded like crap, and they made sure it was like that same nostalgic level of crap. So it was great. So he gets beaten. Sunspot is actually like dying. Earlier, we forgot to mention, Mojo says, I'm not going to go as dramatic as say, if you die in the video game, then you die in real life, but stakes. And from off camera, you see like this little green pulse, and it's like, okay, awesome. They're going to throw an extra life. I don't remember extra lives in that video game, but obviously.
I think that was Mojo's point too, right? He's like, wait, how did that get there? And also,
pretty cool.
Minor detail is a nitpick. Like, I noticed it last night when we rewatched it. Scum and Villainy. I was like, Jubilee picked it up and she didn't get the extra life.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
You don't get to choose what you do with this.
Did you?
It reminds me of back in like playing Contra or like Metal Slug, and like you have the rocket launcher, and you're like, I don't want to pick up that gun, so you're like trying to jump over it to not like.
I was gonna say, like, when me and my brother would play like those team up, like beat 'em up games, we'd always like yell at each other because like one of us wouldn't need the life, but we'd like run into it by accident, like you said.
Totally.
And be like, damn it, Ron, I needed that one. I was like, I'm sorry.
There's a great dorkly bit that they did in Turtles in Time where there's 3 valid arguments between Leonardo, Raphael, and Donatello of who should pick up the pizza, because one has more lives left and the other one has more damage and stuff like that. And then Mikey just walks over it by accident. Right. And he gets, it's like he had full health and it didn't matter to him. It was perfect. So Mojo's obviously confused. Sunspot gets revived. And then you get this giant hand that pops up right as Magneto looks like he's being revived, pulls them through. And you find out that they're actually brought into one of his broadcast servers as opposed to one of his game servers as a way to give a little bit of time. And that's where we finally get the formal reveal that this is a beta version of Jubilee as the only one that has survived ongoing tests of an infinite amount of playthroughs, essentially. And
dope.
Again, having not read the original story that this was loosely based off of, I was not expecting that. I don't know why, but I put money on the table. I wouldn't have guessed it was actually Jubilee in this. So,
oh man, that's so cool. The moment we saw the shades, I was like, they're doing something with this.
Yeah,
but they pulled it off great.
Basically, Jubilee's like, oh, this is great. Of course, if there's a video game with me in it, there would be cheat codes, and that's where we get that heartfelt speech about growing, moving on, accepting responsibility that Allison was giving for the voiceover. And then we got the reference that this show has a special attachment to, which is, so Magneto was right. And Tim, I know you said you haven't done the crazy rewatch because you're not a lunatic like we are. The first time the phrase Magneto was right was written anywhere was in the finale of X-Men 92 in 1997. It was graffiti on a wall and then would not get referenced in the comics until I believe it would have been like Quentin Quire's debut when he had the Magneto was right t-shirt. That would have been 6 to 7 years later, probably. Then we literally get the classic Konami arcade machine that's there. It had all 6 players on it, but they replaced Dazzler in it. And it was actually Jean Grey's headshot instead of Dazzler's headshot there, which I did like earlier too. They actually helped fix a continuity gap that people questioned about with 92, because Dazzler originally appeared in the first Mojoverse episode, and then later she would appear in the real world performing in the club where she meets Scott and stuff like that. Mojo references that he had Dazzler at one point and then she got a gig. And that actually helps fill out why the same Dazzler was both the makeup artist in Mojoverse and then actually performing as herself as we know her in that other spot. But then Mojo comes out and we get this big final boss battle.
And it's awesome. I'm just such a sucker for the easy team up stuff of holding the hands and powering up more and like, it was just rad. And I love some of the lines that he had of like, you may have canceled me today, but I'll gut you in the reboot. It's just good stuff.
He hits things that sound very, very tropey, but because of how the character is written, like it becomes fun. It doesn't feel like like it doesn't make you groan and be like, oh, really this again? It's them being so over the top makes it work. And then we also get Sunspot actually using his power when he makes a save at 1.2.
I would like to point out, like when they first got in the game, Sunspot was like, oh, I don't want to use my powers because like what if there's cameras and like my parents see it? And Jubilee's like, well, you think everybody's watching you and like you're going to be on TV or something? It's like, yeah, that's exactly what's happening. Actually, he was right.
Actually, Sunspot was right. Put the graffiti up.
To be fair, he's like also 18 years old, young, single, attractive dude. So he literally believes the entire world is watching him, even if the cameras were not on him.
And we also suspected, because he mentioned he came from money, that he might have been like the 90s era, like Trump family, like they had like property around New York and like, like Nepo baby kind of.
Yeah, that's why he was added to the show, because they wanted to get all the Nepo babies to enjoy X-Men 97 as well.
Of course.
So they get the big hit on Mojo. It finishes him off. Everything starts exploding within the server room. And then Mojo, in his real world, ends up like basically burning out. And then you get this really like awkward shot of Spiral pushing him over. And I'm curious if that's like, well, he's out, I'm the new producer. Because she's always been at his beck and call. So now it's like, maybe this is her making a power play.
Her Starscream moment. Yeah, I kind of got that read too. I feel like I don't think we're going to come back to this necessarily this season, but I could see them like coming back to the Mojo World stuff eventually.
Well, we know that season 2 was already in production before this even started airing. To date, the recording date of this, I want to say it was 2 days ago. CBR reported that Marvel was already, if it has not been formally greenlit, but it's massive consideration to be greenlit for its season 3. So
we'll way, that's so exciting.
I mean, that makes sense though, because it's the highest rated MCU project ever.
And the viewership has been massive. I want to say Larry Houston, who is the director of X-Men, the animated series in 92, mentions that the viewership of the original 92 episodes went up like 500% each in the weeks following the trailer to this launch happening.
What a trailer. I mean, it sells you.
Yeah. And it led Rod to making the snarkiest meme possible, where we'll send it to you later, Tim, where he was just like, all these people who are binging right now. And it's like, we've been doing this for 2 years.
Yeah.
I see like all these other like podcasts and nerd shows and stuff being like, here's your guide to how to rewatch 5 seasons of X-Men in 2 weeks. I'm like, that's insanity. Like,
that doesn't sound fun. Back in the real world, they realize everything is all good. The Motendo is like just completely burnt out. And then we finally get the kiss between the two of them, which like we had been debating, like, were they hooking up yet or not? At least now we have the confirmation for it. But I love the visual of how it happened.
Literal fireworks, right? Yeah, it's just like, dude, it was great. Like, I mean, I believe it. I love it. I'm here for it. And I feel like this was such a nice segue into the way more serious and more adult Storm storyline that we're about to get.
That's true. We do get like both ends of the spectrum, right? We have like teenage, almost like lust, and then like romance the second half.
And I just think that it did a great job of like bridging this wacky Nintendo storyline with like this really tragic real world thing, and it felt expertly done.
Yeah, I do love the visuals that we've seen for Jubilee in the past. Is always like the fireworks that are exploding. These were a calmer, like just they were floating up and just kind of like illuminating the room. Yeah. This is one of the only times where I do wish that this was hand drawn and not like the new CG 2D animation style, because God, I would love to have like one of those frames from like an episode like this, Friend of the show, Matt Robb, actually gifted me for Christmas. Yeah. The Colossus holding Wolverine cell from 92.
So tight.
Oh. All right, so any closing thoughts on Motenda before we jump over to Life Death?
Loved it. I honestly can't gush any more than I already have. It was so damn good.
Yeah, I think it's fun. It's like an improvement on like the quote unquote like filler episodes, like in Jubilee it seems to be her thing to get like these weird like tangent storylines, because she had Fairy Tale Theater in the last series.
Let's not talk about that one.
Right, but this is like what that could have been,
Yeah.
Like, where it's not directly related with the storyline, but we get like one piece, like her and Sunspot are like a thing now, and Jubilee's learned to kind of grow up, I guess, is like the moral of the story, like not being afraid of growing up.
Right.
But yeah, I was like, oh wait, Jubilee's always on these like little. The only other thing they could have done is like give her like a D&D campaign or something, right?
That's hella funny, yeah.
My final thought on this one is just like, I was itching to play the arcade game again, and I need to figure out a connect of an Xbox 360 that has that installed. I need to borrow somebody's login, because you cannot buy that anywhere right now. It's literally off the Xbox store. So going into Life Death, and this is one of those times where watching the episode, literally, we did this one 3 times because of the Scum and Villainy appearances that we went to. But the owl is there the entire episode, and I did not realize just how present that damn bird is throughout the entire episode.
This one thing I actually did notice the first watch, because when Storm and Forge are inside the cabin, I was like, that's weird that there's an owl inside the house just watching them.
I did not notice that until the third watch through of just the eyes up there.
It's so random what I noticed.
Episode starts off, Forge is making dinner. We interpret that since they met at that bar in Dallas, she's gone to stay with him so he could help her get her powers back. We get the best explanation of a mutant power that Rod kind of predicted at one point, and it was just perfect, where basically you're just smart is your mutant power.
That's funny.
We did this joke before on the show where, like, you know, if you get depowered, what if you seemed like a normal person because your power was being super smart, but you're normally an idiot? So like when you get blasted with that collar gun or whatever, then you just become like an imbecile, but you were like just a moderate human being before.
Yeah, that's great.
that would be my power.
We get some backstory as to Forge's injuries, where there was a war based on the age that would have been Vietnam for us in real time, given that he's probably 40s, 50s, and he lost his hand and his leg when that was all going on. They also start talking about the fact that, you know, he was a friend of Charles and, you know, he owes him a great deal. And that's one of the only things that we haven't really gotten into, because if you look back at the Cold Comfort episode, they really didn't know each other at that point. So curious if that's just a line or if it's something that actually happened off camera that we'll explore in another episode.
Yeah, because in that episode, Charles was like, wait, the government was giving you guys money? I've been off here like funding myself.
No. And then, Rod, do you want to talk about Storm on the horse?
That was a great homage to, I didn't watch these movies, but like, I think it was a great homage to those like horse girl movies, you know? You know what I mean though? Like, I say that in the nicest way possible. It's like, they connect with the horses and nature and stuff, and then they get in an argument with their boyfriend and they ride off into the night, you know, kind of thing. But yeah, I love the suggestion of Forge. He said something to when he's talking about his injuries. She was like, "How did you fix yourself?" And he was like, "Oh, I didn't. I just like adapted, you know, and got creative." I think it was his phrasing. Yep. And then it cuts to that horse scene, and Storm just talked about how she misses flying, and then they go on the horses, and she just like lets her arms like off the horse. It's such a beautiful moment. Like, it's almost teary-eyed like thinking about it. And then Forge looks back and he's like, "You got creative." I was like, oh my god.
It's so good. It's so good. And I mean, maybe I'm taking this too far, but entirely, I was like, this is a sex scene. Like, this is just a thinly veiled like kids metaphor for like how much could we get away with. Like, I really feel like they were trying to like push that idea of like, yo, there's an intimate moment happening between these two people. And like I think they did a really tasteful job. Like, I feel like it pushed the line, but this reminded me a lot of like real like romantic movies and like how they kind of can get there, and having the dialogue between them, it felt very intimate, sensual, and her eventually like talking to the wind and like, heed my call and all that. It's like, it's so good.
See, I kind of read that back and forth as like foreplay, essentially. I was like, I just assumed between the cut scenes that they just hooked up. Like, that was probably like the 200th time. We don't know how long they've been on that ranch.
They're shacking up.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's been basically enough time that she left the team, met him at the bar, is living pretty comfortably in the house with like her own like overalls and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And they've already gone through the entire process of Genosha being admitted to the UN. And I don't know enough about geopolitical stuff, but I feel like getting added to the UN takes more than like a week of real time, you know?
Probably, yeah.
And we already know Storm is like super attractive and everything. They were not hiding that Forge was like a snack.
Oh yeah.
Like he's got like the booty shorts and like everything going on.
Again, the owl's there. They're at the edge of this cliff, and she points out that something weird is going on with the weather because the wind pattern doesn't match the rest of the world. And that was like, again, first time watching, didn't really like pick up on that because I didn't know where this story was going. But the second it's like, oh, they're in like a weird trap limbo thing right now that they're not even aware of, kind of scenario.
Yeah. Which was a lot.
So that was the thing I didn't notice until the third watch. Was like, oh, that was the connection between the episodes besides the romance and the lust thing or the differentiation between the two was that they're both kind of trapped in simulations. Mm-hmm. See, the obvious things I'm not like getting.
So he also has a great line where it's like, you of all people should know how fast the weather can change. And then we go into the lab, and this was Easter egg crack for me. In the lab, you see there is a picture of all the members of X Factor, which has led to everybody on the internet now being like, I need an X Factor show. And I'm like, you guys have never read Peter David's X Factor. You need to chill the fuck out right now. And then there is a photo. And did you pick up on who is in the photo, Rod?
Yeah, so the person I did know, because he sent me this picture before, was Dr. Adler. I'm assuming that was the real Dr. Adler because of the timing, right? It wasn't Mystique, because Mystique, I think that was before Mystique.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yep.
So this is probably the real Dr. Adler, the geneticist, I want to say.
Mm-hmm. The one who worked on Muir Island, who was renting space from Moira. That I believe that was before Adler encountered Apocalypse and was killed scenario. Yep.
Yeah, because I originally thought it was like, oh, Mystique got to him. I was like, wait, that timing doesn't work if it was the war and stuff. So it probably was the real Dr. Adler.
Where does Mystique end? Where did we last see her in the show?
The last episode would have been the one where it's Mystique is captured by Graydon Creed, and Nightcrawler and Rogue and Wolverine go to save her. The dam blows up at the end, and she gives the impression that she's missing to the kids, but we see that she is absolutely alive. So yes,
got it.
That, I think episode order, that is the last spot we would have seen her. So
cool. I remember that now because we were saying this is like that cartoon logic where she's within eye and earshot of all the main characters,
and they're just oblivious
in the background, like, oh, they don't see her.
That's so funny. Love it.
But the other person in the photo, costume design, looks like it's Bastion, which I believe is from the future. Like, I don't think Bastion was in the 90s. So I think they're kind of messing with the timelines around it. But I believe Bastion is essentially like a super sentinel. Like, not Nimrod level, but a very powerful Sentinel. I could be wrong about that. I haven't read Bastion in a while. She hops in this machine. They allude to her claustrophobia pretty quickly, but then they get past it, and that's where you see she is trying to use her powers again, points right up to the owl, nothing happens, and then she gets the false hope of, oh, I'm going to try again. She gives the big, like, bombastic speech, and then you find out that it's just birds in the trees, and she just like breaks down crying, understandably.
They did her so dirty.
So dirty.
During the rewatch, because Rod and I never get to actually watch these in person together, as that was happening, I literally turned and watched his reaction to it because I was just like, Rod is not happy right now. I thought Rod was going to start booing at a bar with a bunch of people we didn't know.
No, I turned around and I was like, oh, they gave Halle Berry's representation.
So that doesn't work. She's saying it can't be real. Go back to the lab. Forge is working on it. And she asks, why is this so important? I think she's finally seen through, like, this has got to be more than you were friends with Xavier. And like, what were your thoughts on that whole, like, the reveal of it?
I thought that she was asking that question to, like, as a leading question for him to profess his love. Like, they had been, you know, kind of in, like, not had that, like, define the relationship talk yet. And then it totally backfired on her.
Yeah. There's a lot going on in these, like, the life, what's it called? Life, death?
Life, death.
Weird name. What a weird name. There was a lot going on here, especially with the big spider guys showing up and stuff, that I was like, I need to rewatch this a bit, because, like, I was definitely not clear on some of what's going on, but I also feel like that's intentional. So
we get the reveal that he, after the war, you know, like a lot of people who were coming back from a war, especially injured, didn't have a support structure, it sounded like. So makes a deal with the U.S. government and the Department of Defense to help create a way to neutralize dangerous mutants. And that's where she understandably loses her shit. Mm-hmm. He alludes to the scientists in Scotland, like we said, Adler. And she basically says, no, this was all a bunch of lies. And then he gives the last volley of, like, not everything's a lie. And somebody said this was a great symmetry to the episode. I can't remember who said it, so I don't want to improperly credit somebody, but it was Jubilee and Sunspot get the kiss, Forge gets the slap across the face, and it was just like the total opposite vibe of these two love stories.
I loved the line that Storm says of, so you lied, my weaver of lies.
Yeah.
So good. So Storm.
I don't know how anybody other than Alison Seeley Smith can ever voice this character.
Oh, yeah.
At this point, I'm just going to petition for her to be the MCU live action Storm. I'm down for it. But that last night at Scum and Villainy, when that slap happened, people cheered. And I get it. Like, I was there. I was like, yeah.
So Storm goes out into the night, is riding through on the horse. The background starts to get red, and then you see these eyes pop up in front. Her and the horse tumbled over a cliff and then smashed through the ceiling of Forge's cabin. And that's where we get the reveal that there's been, like, and it's there's a cooing that sounds like an owl too. And then this demon comes through, and you get this big reveal of this character who is called the Adversary. And that's actually the character's name.
I didn't catch on to that until after I looked at social media that was actually the character's name. I thought they were just describing themselves. Whatever animal sound that they pulled for the Adversary must have been a real world sound. John, I'm going to send you a picture right now. my cat jumped right up on the TV and was like,
Rod, you can put this on our socials. You have the ability to do that.
Yeah, no, I will. I'm just so you can see it. I was just saying because she's giving me this look like that's here right now.
Right.
She doesn't react to anything that's like fake. She's used to hearing me watch superhero movies and stuff, but this nature sound was like something real because she was like, "We're in danger."
I shot it over to you too, Tim.
She's so concerned.
Yeah, that's awesome.
From the comics, the adversary did appear in there, known as a trickster spirit that I believe it was the Cheyenne Nation recognized. So this has a little bit of real world mythos put into it too.
I'm curious because I noticed that the voice was also Allison Seeley Smith.
It was.
I'm curious if that's gonna be consistent or if that character's voice changes with whoever they're dealing with. You know, if it's always like a self thing.
Yep.
Like, does it sound like Forge to Forge?
I mean, that's what we'll find out because Forge tries to fight back, gets bitten through the shoulder by this demon.
Brutal.
I was like, oh my God, like they went for it with all this stuff in this season. It's amazing. I'm so happy it is made for like a general audience and not like, the TV7 audience because none of this works the same way if you try to make this purely for kids anymore, Yeah,
because Forge says damn in that scene.
Yep, you damn demon. Yep.
They're going.
And then that's where we get the reveal that it is the adversary and it is feeding off of desperation and misery. And Storm is like, oh, this must be death. And the adversary is like, I'm not going to let this meal go away because it has found somebody who is at their lowest point and has continued to make it worse or be there as it keeps getting worse. Like, I have no doubt in my mind that it was a little bit of the adversary's trick of the birds doing the fake out in the tree. So going from a very high note at the end of the Jubilee and Sunspot story to, oh, Storm and Forge are in deep shit and we're not going to get resolution on it for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So
I love it though. Keep us in. I'm so happy the show's not all out. I love that there's like week to week. They're so far great with the cliffhangers.
Yeah.
As soon as that cut to black, I texted JC. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, we were both watching at midnight. So by the time I think the animation went to the second character click on the credits, that was when Rod's text message came through. It was that perfect timing. Yeah. So that is everything about this episode. Tim, was there anything, whether it's about the series so far or this episode, that we didn't hit on that you want to bring up?
Not really, man. I feel like we kind of covered it all. I'm so in everything you're talking about there being season 2 and 3. I'm just extremely excited that that's happening. I'm very hopeful that this treatment can be given to other things. I know there's been talk about Spider-Man. I'd love to see that. But yeah, I just think this is very special. And whether or not we get anything else, I'm so happy we have this.
Yeah, it kind of doesn't seem real that this kind of thing happens because you look at all the other shows that we grew up on when we were kids and they all had like their endpoint and then they were rebooted. Like, it's very rare that we actually see the continuation of those beloved storylines and stuff.
Dude, I mean, the at this point, I feel like I can ask for anything and there's a chance it might actually happen. So I just need to once again put out in the world, and I know how many complications there are with this, but if I ever get a Spectacular Spider-Man season 3, that's just the end for me. Like, that is just like, we need it, everybody. Come on. And while I'm being greedy, season 3 and 4, come on.
And I'm not saying anything disparaging about it because I didn't watch it, but it came out at that time when I was like not watching cartoons for whatever was going on in my life. And it's like, I've heard so much good stuff about that show that I hope it happens for the people like you.
You gotta watch it. And it's only 2 seasons. I think that means that they're 2 13-episode seasons, if I remember correctly. So the entire show is 26 episodes.
That's
I could not recommend it higher, man. It is some real good Spider-Man.
I feel like the biggest trick with Spider-Man is they already have like the Spider-Verse stuff happening, and that's such like a high bar to be compared to as far as animation. And then you have like the other end of the spectrum, like Madam Web,
right?
And more.
Well, we also have like the Spider-Man show that is coming out too. Is it freshman year or something like that?
Well, no, they renamed it. Now it's Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man.
Friendly Neighborhood. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm very trepidatious about that one, but I was about this as well, and they proved me wrong. So I'm still excited for it, but like I just struggle to find any interest in everything they've shown so far. I feel is a little bit not what I'm looking for a Spider-Man cartoon. And like I feel like when they first announced it, like, oh, freshman year, I'm like, oh, cool, it's going to be his story of everything we saw before, like his early Spider-Man days, and then it's like, oh no, well, Norman Osborn's here, and it's like they just jumped it in like way too deep into stuff that I'm like, that just doesn't make sense for the MCU, and now it sounds like they're backtracking that. So we'll see.
Yeah. All right. Awesome, Tim. Thank you so much for popping on. This is the first time we've podcasted together since, I want to say you guys were still Game Over Greggy show the last time I was on with you guys in San Francisco. Yeah. It was well before the new studio. So yeah.
Oh yeah. That's wild. Well, thank you so much for having me. Honestly, I love this show so much, and I'm so excited to talk to anybody about it, but honored to talk to y'all about it. I'm very impressed that y'all have been doing the show for so long and everything. And hey, you guys are experts at this point.
JC is. I'm professionally the idiot.
Tim, for the people who are hearing you for the first time because you're on this, where does everybody find you?
You can find me at Tim Gettys, Gettys, on all of the socials. I am over at Kind of Funny. If you just look for Kind of Funny on YouTube, if you're into video games, if you're into comic books, movies, any of that stuff, we talk about all of it. We do it live every single day. So we're a live talk show network. That's what we like calling ourselves these days. But yeah, a lot of fun. So come check us out.
Rod, final thoughts?
I think we covered everything. I hate waiting 2 weeks for the rest of, not just for the not conclusion, but like more story about Storm. But I love the setup so much. You know, I already talked about it, of like hearing like story stuff. But yeah, I guess next week everybody's expecting a Gambit episode. So
yeah, we'll see. We'll
see.
We'll find out on Tuesday because that's when Marvel releases their trailers.
So I'm muting all the Marvel stuff now because they're not technically spoilers, but I would have wanted to see the 16-bit stuff like when watching the show and not in a thumbnail.
I didn't see it. I was so lucky that I happened to be busy, and so I did not know. So when the episode started, I was like, let's go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us. If you have any thoughts, make sure to drop them into the comments for either the YouTube upload or the official Instagram post about this episode. If you like what you heard, we'd appreciate a rating on the podcast app of your choosing. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Spotify, YouTube Podcasts, and CastBox. And we're done. We did it in under 2 hours this week.
Hey.
Thank you.